Okay, hello again, everyone. We are now actually going to start the class. We're going to be focusing on, I was debating whether to do the sheer, stay the course and do on Parashat Shmini, especially because it's one of the few parashot in the book, in the Sefer Vayikra, that actually have a story. But I decided that you can't not do something for Pesach. I mean, you can, but it just didn't seem right. Two, next week's Parsha isn't Shmini. We will have a chance to learn about Parshat Shmini because this coming Shabbat we're not reading Shmini anyway. What?
And 2 weeks hence we can have a class, right?
Bezrat Hashem, yes. And then I also remembered that in the Haggadah itself, there are quite a few midrashim. So I said, let's take a look at a text that we are all pretty familiar with, and let's try to take a look at it with this new eye that we have been developing of seeing how Midrash works, how Midrash, is based on a pasuk, how it deals with the pasuk, how it's answering a question in the pasuk, or it is illuminating something in the pasuk. So that's what we're going to be looking at now. So I'm happy you guys brought Chumashim because we might use them. I'm just going to excuse myself for 10 seconds just to get a drink of water.
Amazing how never did 5,000 miles.
But I was close.
Yes. Okay. So hopefully everyone has a source sheet. At first, I said, let's try to cover all the midrashim, all the midrashim in the Haggadah that are based on a pasuk. Okay, because the truth is that practically all of Magid is a midrash, meaning large parts of Magid are a midrash. When I say midrash, that they are, if we go back to the very first class we had, and what does the word medrash means? It's to be doresh. Doresh is to literally mean to inquire, okay, into a text, okay, and to extrapolate. Lidrosh means to inquire into inquire something. In this case, it's lidrosh tapasuk, to inquire from the, not as if to ask, but to delve into and to extrapolate something or extrapolate something on a verse. So based on that, anywhere in the Magid where things are being said based on a pasuk, that's a midrash. The majority of Magid is a midrashim, are bits and pieces of midrashim that were said that were either collected from other places or were just put in there to begin with. So I've decided to take two of them, and we're going to try to use the same eye we always use, although it might be a little bit different. But as you go through the Haggadah, or you prepare for the Seder night, and you maybe read through the Haggadah, maybe look at it with this eye a little bit to see how the midrash is being used. Okay, let's start. We're actually going to start from the second page. Okay, the second page or the second side of the page, the bottom half. Okay, and this is the story about the 5 rabbis who were gathered and learning Torah all night. Okay, everyone see it? So we're first going to read the pasuk that serves as the foundation of the Midrash. Because when you read in the Haggadah, we think it's just a nice story. Okay? And it is. It is obviously a nice story. It is a story that comes to prove a point. But what it really is, we'll see, it's a Midrash. And again, this is the kind of thing that now that we understand Midrash better, we read a text and we realize there's actually a Midrash here. Let's just put it into context of the Haggadah, of the Magid. So, this paragraph appears right after the Magid says, "Afilu kulanu chachamim, kulanu nevonim, kulanu yodim et Torah." Even if we are all wise, we are all learned, we all know the entire Torah, it is still a mitzvah upon us to tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And then the Maggid goes to, after it makes the statement that telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim is not an obligation of knowledge, rather an obligation of almost like ritual. It's not about acquiring knowledge. And it comes to in it, and it goes and says, here, we'll bring you proof. Here's a story about 5 of the greatest sages that spent the entire night, right, telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, which of course proves the point that no matter how learned you are, you still have to tell the story. Okay, that's how we usually understand this story. But really, as we've seen many, many times, this is a very important point. Medrash, a lot of times, we saw sometimes, let's say, the Medrash, in order to explain this pasuk, it will bring a pasuk from somewhere else. Meaning, a lot of rabbis said a lot of different things, and if it's relevant to a pasuk, in our case, then someone will bring it and say, hey, I have this story, or this idea, or this other verse. So that's what, you'll understand soon what I mean. Let's start reading, okay? We're first going to read the pasuk, and of course we're going to ask questions. So the pasuk that is going to serve as the foundation of this midrash is taken from Sefer Devarim. It says the following: in order that you remember the day of your going out from the land of Egypt, all the days of your life. Leman tizko et yom tzitcha mitzrayim kol yamei chayecha. Questions? Think like the Midrash does.
Why do you have to remember it every day of your life?
Okay, so one question has to do with the content, with the idea that's being said, which is why? Okay, what would be the reason that this is so important that it needs to be remembered every day? Okay, good. Other questions? Yes, Alex.
Why not nights? Maybe?
Okay, so saying, let's say it says the day that going out from the land of Egypt. So wait, what's your question?
You remember all the days of your life. Maybe you can answer a question. What about the nights?
Oh.
Or is that...
No. I thought you were asking. I think it's okay. I think it's a decent question. I thought you were going to ask something even better, which is, when did we leave Egypt?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Did we leave at night or did we?
Absolutely, we left at night.
I thought we said we're not going to leave at night in the darkness. We'll leave at the daytime when.
No, they left it. Sure, they left at night.
About midnight we agreed, but we didn't leave till the day. Maybe I'm mistaken.
I'm pretty sure we started leaving at night. Look, it's not as if there was like, you're talking about 3 million people, right? It's not as if they all went from, like over the border. It's not as if they opened the gate and went from one side of the border to the other side of the border. It's a process. But yeah, okay, yes?
I have to remember I didn't live in Egypt.
What? Okay. So staying with the question of content, which is why is this so important, and why do I need to, if I wasn't there? Okay, good. Let's.
Another question,
Yeah.
and another question, it looks like personal. What about nation? Nation doesn't have to remember just the person.
Who says this is talking just to a person?
It's from the text.
Oh, in the Hebrew, you're saying leman tizko is in the singular. Right. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Any other questions? I'm looking. These are all excellent questions that have to do with the reasoning of this obligation, which are, of course, they're very, very normal and logical questions for a person to ask, and it's usually the first type of question we ask, which is why. Especially if it seems so important. Why? But the Midrash we've seen, the Midrash sometimes will answer those questions. But right now we're looking for much more seemingly minuscule questions, more technical. Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, the
the idea that, and it certainly can't minimize leaving Egypt as being highly significant, but there was stealing of the Torah, there's the parting of the sea, there's the plagues, there's lots of stuff that you would want to remember.
Well,
in addition,
who's to say it's you guys are drifting? I think the phone is falling.
No, we're fine.
Oh, he's still backward.
I see you guys kind of drifting slowly. No, I can't see you guys. I can't see you guys. There you go. So, yeah, there you go. We're good. So, Ron, you're assuming that there isn't an equal obligation to remember those things. You actually are correct. There isn't a mitzvah to remember those things. Definitely not so central. But from this verse, we don't know that. It doesn't say here. It doesn't say here you shall only remember this. This verse doesn't make it sound exclusive. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you have no way of knowing that from this verse.
when it's saying remember X, that's what it's telling you to remember. It's not saying don't remember Y. It's saying remember X.
That particular day.
Okay. Yes. Wait, Paul, you had something? Yeah.
No, that was kind of my question with Ron. It says that particular day. Remember that particular day.
Okay.
But all the other events happen before and after.
See, obviously, this day is not just very significant. Maybe. Okay. Yes.
Why does it say Zaman so that you will? Many times Hashem says, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt. We're reminded so many times. Why does here again we have to say so that you will remember? We're told 100 times this.
Okay. Good. Yes.
It seems that you're still going out of Egypt.
Okay.
Remember that going out, it's like you continue to go, you're still going out. You're still not there.
Right. You're saying it sounds like the obligation is not something which is just remembering something that happened a long time ago. It seems to be a living memory. I agree. Okay. But you guys are asking all these questions are great questions. Let's look at, is there anything in the simple language? I'm not looking out for a big idea question. Let's look for simple language questions.
We got the whole thing here because it says what comes before in order that you may remember the date.
You're right. You're right to want to look at beforehand, but we've seen in this case, for the questions that the Midrash is going to be talking about, you don't need the wider context.
Okay.
Anything seem...
You have to remember in order.
What?
You have to remember order. In order.
Okay.
You remember.
Okay. How about I'm looking at the ending, the way the verse ends. The way the verse ends. Anything strike us as strange about it, or that we feel deserves inquiry? Okay, so the Midrash will be talking about the final phrase of the pasuk. I'm going to read the pasuk to you the way it should have been sufficient. You ready? In order that you remember the day of your going out of the land of Egypt. That should have been it. If the Torah says you need to remember this day, obviously it's forever. It's not as if Aseret Dibrot. Why doesn't it say, thou shalt not murder all the days of your life? Thou shalt not murder. Right? By the way, please, I've said this a few times. It's not thou shalt not kill. That's the Christian translation, and there's a reason why and there's a huge difference between thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not murder. We believe that you can kill. Sometimes it's a mitzvah to kill. Sometimes it's a good deed to kill. You're not allowed to murder. Killing is not bad. Murdering is bad. Killing can be good. That goes back to our share from last week. Sometimes war, is part of shalom. But okay, I digress. But it doesn't say, thou shalt not steal all the days of your life. By the way, it could also just say, even if you wanted to say, this is really important. So just say, so one option of how it could be written was, in order that you remember the day of your going out of the land of Egypt. Or it could have said, in order that you remember the day of your going out of from the land of Egypt, all your days. But it says, you need to do this obligation, and I'm telling you, you need to do it all your days, and you need to do all the days of your life. That is a double emphasis. Why would this mitzvah have a double emphasis? When it doesn't say, keep the Sabbath all your days. Keep the Sabbath, meaning the mitzvah by definition are an obligation all the time, unless they're quantified. So you only have to keep the Sabbath once every 7 days. But there's no time limit in history to, at some point, you don't have to keep the Sabbath anymore. So if there's a mitzvah to remember us leaving Egypt, why does it have to say you have to remember this all your days and all the days that you're alive? Yes, I see we have some answers. Yes.
Yeah, I think you could take it a different way, and that is every day, not all the days of your life, but every day of your life, remember this, so that you have a different appreciation for your life every day. Not remember it till you die, but remember it every day of your life.
Yeah, don't let day go by without remembering. That's the Shema context.
Okay, very good. We'll soon read the Midrash, and we'll see that one of the explanations is exactly what he's saying. But we first start from the phrasing, which is a strange phrasing, right? Yes?
Yeah, so that it's telling that there is afterlife.
I'm sorry? See, what do you mean by other? What do you mean by other life?
Afterlife. The afterlife.
Okay. So, yes, we'll see the Midrash going that direction as well. But if so, what does that mean? Okay, what does that mean? To remember the Exodus and the afterlife. What does that mean?
Or not to remember the afterlife, because you only have to do it when you are alive.
What does that mean? No, I'm saying, what does it mean? It's okay. You know what? And after I die, I need to observe the Sabbath, or I need to observe thou shalt not steal. However you want to understand it, this is a strange phrase. Yes. Do we have someone else who wanted to comment?
Yomei HaMashiach. This is what they mean.
Okay. But why doesn't it say about Shabbat? Kabed et avicha v'et imecha kol yemei chayecha. I mean, don't we have to respect our parents every day of our lives?
And also in the afterlife, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So again, it's something that's so casual, we don't notice it. But if you suddenly have a commandment that has this phrase that no other mitzvah has, at least that I'm aware of, and definitely most mitzvah do not have, this is where the Midrash comes in. So the Torah is saying something here that is unusual. It's using a phrase that shouldn't. Again, that is right. You see, hopefully you guys see it now. This is not a normal phrasing.
But is it more necessary than honoring parents? Because we wouldn't necessarily relate our day-to-day lives to leaving Egypt.
You're saying whereas our kids assume every day they need to respect us.
I hope so.
Well, I'm sure if we all now want to, we're willing to share some war stories. I think that if we could choose which mitzvah should have this extra reminder that needs to be done every day of your life, I'm guessing that if we took a poll, most people would say, no, remembering we left Egypt, that's easy. but to do every day of your life. But respecting your parents, I'd much prefer to put it over there. Yeah. Hi, Oleg.
So maybe, just because I guess what Ron said as well, maybe this is just to basically say that that supersedes everything else. So the fact that Jews went out of Egypt or were led out of Egypt liberates them. And in order to be able to do all other mitzvahs, you need to be free first. So when you approach the day where you wake up, you wake up as a free man, and that gives you options of doing things or not doing things. Versus years in bondage, where regardless of what you believed, what your heritage was, you weren't able to do anything with that. And
so
maybe that.
Okay. So what Oleg is saying is suggesting I think an excellent answer to why it is that this specific mitzvah. I mean, first we need to recognize that this phrasing is unique. It is extraordinary. It is not the ordinary phrasing. So like you're saying, well, maybe because this mitzvah is a foundational mitzvah. Because without assuming, meaning the belief or the living memory of the Exodus is the foundation for the entire, for Jewish existence, Jewish living, Jewish faith, practice, and therefore, if a person is not living on a daily basis the freedom that was granted in Mitzrayim, then they can't, or there is less or no meaning to the rest of our relationship with God or our commitments and our mitzvot, since they're not on the foundation of identity, of so on and so forth. I think it's a beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. Okay, now let's see what the Medrash does with it. Okay? And what we're going to do, what we always do. We're going to read the Midrash and we're going to ask ourselves, did the Midrash answer the question? How did they answer the question? And what, if anything, is left open? Or what difficulties does the answer now present? Okay, let's read the Midrash. It happened once that Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon were reclining in Bnei Brak and were telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt that whole night, until their students came and said to them, the time of the morning Shema has arrived. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, behold, I am like a man of 70 years, and I have not merited that the Exodus from Egypt should be said at night, until Ben Zoma explicated it, was dorish it, as it is stated, in order that you remember the days of your going out from the land of Egypt, all the days of your life. The days of your life, the days. All the days of your life, the nights. But the sages say, the days of your life, this world, all the days of your life, to bring to the days of the Mashiach. Okay, wait, let's spend a few seconds looking at it, trying to digest it a little bit. So we have three parts. Sorry, just a second. Three parts to the Midrash. The first part is a story about the five rabbis and what they did that night. And then the next two stages is the two different drashas on the pasuk that we're discussing, right? With the first one saying, as was suggested before, all the days refers to the actual days. You need to remember the Exodus every day, and all the days, right? So you could have just said needs to remember the days of your life. What's all? So it means it comes to add, not just the days of your life, all the days of your life. So say, all days of your life is days, all is the nights. The second explanation, as someone hinted towards, but a slight difference, is days of your life. This world, all the days of your life, doesn't say the next world. It says to bring to the days of the Mashiach. So, our first question: has the Midrash answered the question?
It provides an explanation for all the days of your life.
Oh, how eloquently put. Meaning you're not.
All the days and nights of your life.
Wait, meaning you're not willing to accept. You're not willing to go so far as to say it answered the question. You're saying it provided an answer. Very well put. Okay. Yes.
Okay. First part, I have a question. They're sitting in Israel. If they're in Israel, so why they're in Bnei Brak, not in Jerusalem?
Why should they be in Jerusalem?
Don't you supposed to be in Jerusalem on Pesach?
These rabbis, it's a good question, and we definitely will talk about the historical context. These rabbis are living after the destruction of the Second Temple.
The second question, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that I never merited to send from Egypt at night. What does it mean? They never had a Seder?
Very, very good question.
What?
I said that is a very good question. He said what? He never did the Leil HaSeder before?
Even if he's young man and he feels at 70.
Right. Someone want to take a swing at that? Someone want to take it? Someone want to try answering that question? Possibly with it.
Night, the 12-hour period following day, but means this other thing of something sort of bigger than just day and night.
Well, why? No, I know that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's answer seems to be very technical, day and night. We got to be careful not to. And the sages disagree. The sages give a different interpretation.
Okay.
Someone challenged that question. That question is making an assumption that is not written in the text. You are making an assumption that is not said anywhere in the text. What was your question again?
My question is, this rabbi, he never had Seder at night?
There's a very big assumption.
They were doing it at night to begin with. So
yes, it does say that it was at night. What does it not say?
Maybe they didn't finish it at night. They just kept going. So they didn't get to that part at night.
But maybe there wasn't the Seder the way it's said today. They just were talking about it, but that's because it says literally they were telling the story of the Exodus of Egypt.
See, this is a good example of what it's like when you're tricked into an assumption and you don't realize that you're accepting an assumption that without any basis. Where does it say that this was happening on Pesach?
Why were they reclining in Bnei Brak?
Well,
I thought the reclining was Pesach.
No. The reason we recline on Pesach is because that is the way in which it was customary for wealthy people to dine. And we want to emulate and we want to experience what it's like to be someone who could just sprawl themselves out. But you're right, the Mesubim is the thing that kind of makes you think, but really we think it because... But
also, Rabbi, because they were telling the story of the Exodus of Egypt the whole night.
So?
That sounds like Pesach night, where the mitzvah is to tell the story. The more you
well, if that's the case, why are their students not with them?
question.
Wait, Celine. Or why are they not with their families?
Because it's not
You mean the rabbis?
Yeah. Why are the rabbis not with their families?
Doesn't it exist still the mitzvah Yigadata Bincha B'Yom Hahu?
Yeah.
If they're discussing this on Pesach, they're supposed to be doing it with their children and their families around, because the mitzvah is to tell it over to your children.
Correct.
And he's sitting just amongst them and they're discussing this.
Correct.
The question, maybe it's not Pesach at all.
I agree. There's nothing to indicate that it's Pesach.
But even if it's not Pesach, the question still holds, because he says, I have not merited that the exodus from Egypt should be said at night. That means he's never said it at night. Which means what? He's never had a Seder?
Okay, great question.
Or even the nighttime Shema. I mean, if we said the morning time, because that's relating the exodus of Egypt at night as well, is it not?
Okay, great. So now we have a wait. So now we have So now we have a real question, which is we have two options. Option one is to come and say that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, didn't recite the Shema ever at night. Well, no, because he could say he recited, but he didn't fulfill the obligation of telling the story. But we have to come and say that, either the Seder of back then didn't look anything like the Seder that we know now. Not impossible, but there's no reason to think that. Okay, especially because almost all the texts that we say today are Tanaic sources. So they're from that era. And they're all based on verses, on psukim, almost all of them. So there would be no reason to think that the Seder back then was completely void of the fundamental aspects that it has today. So either we have to assume that he's never done that the Seder was completely different, or we have to assume that he's never done a Seder. Or, what's the third option?
I hope there's a third option, because those first two don't sound very good.
Did a Seder exist at that time? Was there a really formal Seder at the time when these men were sitting in Bnei Brak?
What do you mean by what do you mean by formal Seder?
A formal Seder, like we sit down today. Did the structure exist at that time like we know it today?
There's no reason to think not, especially because we see in the Mishnah discussions of what is done during the Seder. So it could have been still in formation at the time. Not could have been. It was still in formation. But the holiday of Pesach and continuing to do Pesach, we know for sure. We know that was continued to be done throughout Jewish history, including during that era. So anyone have an idea for a third option? Right? Option one, the Seder of back then looked nothing like it does today, and it did not include the telling of the story of the Exodus, which doesn't make any sense. Second option is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah never participated in the Seder. Doesn't make any sense. Anyone have a third option?
Seder was not at night.
Or maybe the Seder wasn't at night. That's also a third option, but also doesn't make sense. Also not possible. Also very, very unlikely. But that's good. That's creative.
Yeah, I like it.
Fourth option, maybe
they're just planning something.
They're just what?
Maybe just planning something. They just sit there together. They talk, and they look at the Yetziat Mitzrayim as a like a model how to do something, because we know it's very hard in Israel this time.
Okay, so we'll get there. Yes, we will get there. Wait. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the flow of this. It's only when the students come and say the time of the morning Shema has arrived. Is that what causes Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah to say this statement? Like, I'm not sure I understand the flow of the mission.
No, I don't think that's necessarily how it needs to be understood, because you first have this introduction of as if like the whole story, right? these 5 rabbis were sitting in Bnei Brak and they were telling the story until the morning, until the students came to them. Like, it's showing the degree to which they were so enthralled with the story that they didn't even notice that it was time to daven Shema, to the point that their students had to come and say, "Rabbis, quickly, we have to daven Shema," right? And this proves that even if we are all wise, we are all learned, we all know the entire Torah, it is a mitzvah upon us to tell the story. What better proof can there be? What better proof can there be than these 5 great sages who obviously know the whole story, but are still spending the entire night riveted with what? With telling the story, even though they know the whole story. Now, if that was the only point, it could have ended here. That's proof for the obligation that even if we're all wise and we're all whatever, it's a mitzvah upon us to tell. But then it comes in basically, then it's telling us, it seems to be saying, now we're going to tell you what one of the things that was said during this night. That's what it seems to be saying. Okay? And it's and it's almost like it's an additional proof. So the first proof is the event that took place. The second proof is what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said. It doesn't tell us that it was said at that night, but it seems to be the fact that it's told right afterwards and it's discussing the obligation that was done that night. It makes sense that it was that this was said during that night. Okay? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, "Behold, I am like a man of 70 years, and I have not merited that the exodus from Egypt should be said at night." That is the sentence we have a problem with. So I would suggest that option 3 or 4 is maybe we don't understand what that sentence means. Because our 3 other options are very difficult to accept. That Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was never at a Seder, or that a Seder in the past did not include telling the story of the Exodus, or that a Seder in the past took place during the day. All 3 of our answers so far are very unlikely. So, if we can't come up with another answer, maybe the phrase we're having difficulty with, we're not understanding it correctly. "Behold, I am like a man of 70 years, and I have not merited that the exodus from Egypt should be said at night, until Ben Zoma explicated it, as it is stated, in order that you remember the day of your going out from the land of Egypt, all the days of your life." The days of your life, the days. That part, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah has no problem with. That's not the Chiddush. All the days of your life, the nights. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, only when I heard Ben Zoma say that all the days of life, that the obligation of saying, telling the story or remembering the Exodus, there's an obligation of it at night. Only then did I merit. What does he say? I have not merited that the Exodus from Egypt should be said at night. So, any idea of what that phrase could mean? Yes.
Can it be that night is allegorical?
Yeah, that is definitely possible, and that is definitely one of the explanations that is brought. That the word night is an allegory for times of darkness.
Yes. But
So,
I have another point.
wait, just 1 second. If we have another answer, I'd like to go with another answer first.
We have in our davening, and when we say the Birkat Hamazon, we always have the term in there, Lezecher Yitziat Mitzrayim, to remember the going out of Egypt, and it's part of our davening. It's part of our benching. So why would it say that he's never been able to say it at night? Has he never Lezecher Yitziat Mitzrayim? Has he never said that in any of his supplications, in any of his davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How could that be?
Fine. Okay, so obviously he did. Of course he did. So fine, you're strengthening our question. So that question now becomes, what does it mean? What could it mean when he says, I haven't merited, what's the phrase here? I have not merited that the exodus from Egypt should be said at night. So obviously he's not talking about a technical statement. He's not talking about a technical recitation. He's obviously talking about more than saying the words. Yes, Oleg.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, so what he explains after, it doesn't make any sense. The days of your life, the days, all the days of your life, the nights. If you follow the logic, it should be that all the days of your life should be day and night.
Yes.
Not the night. Nothing points to the night when it say all the days.
You're saying all points.
So the word,
Why not say days and nights instead of all the days?
when it
and
says, if it would have said, again, the Midrash a lot of times builds on top of to what degree is this word or phrase needed, or what would be missing? Would there be anything missing from the verse if this phrase wasn't here? So it could have just said, in order that you remember the day of your going out from the land of Egypt. All right. I'm trying to think how to phrase it in English. In Hebrew, it works a little bit better.
But see what I'm saying is
because it would have said throughout your days. When it says all, it's trying to include more than the default. So they're saying that all the days is not just the days. Not just the days of your life, but all the days. So it seems the understanding of the Midrash is it's coming to add in more than days. Because if it would be just days, it would say the days. You shall remember it, the days of your life. All the days comes to add something more than the days. What? I'm sorry?
No, what I'm saying is, if you're talking about daylight, the period of the day, it looks like he's talking about period of the day, daylight and night. When you say all days of your life, we in normal language would assume that
24 hours.
24 hours. So why does it? What does he say?
I hear what you're saying. Okay. I hear what you're saying. So you're saying that if it would just say days of your life, then we would say, day and night. And the moment he comes and separates between day and night, then why do you need to emphasize? We would have thought that anyway, is what you're saying. Okay. Yes.
It seems to me you're talking about 5 great sages. If we're sitting around, we would fall asleep after 30 seconds of saying, remember we left Egypt. If they were enthralled for 10 hours in a conversation, they had to be talking about something profound.
Okay.
And to forget about Shema, and forget that the sun rose. They're not talking about days and nights. They have to be talking about something that really gave them a huge insight about what life is all about and the meaning of life.
Okay. So now, there we go. Now I think we're at the point where what you're saying is, and this answers 2 of our problems. Now we're saying, obviously, or logic would dictate that when he says that I have not merited the story of the Exodus from Egypt, where is it again? I have not merited that the Exodus from Egypt should be said at night. He obviously is not talking about the technical saying the words of the Exodus or even telling the story. He's obviously talking about what this is doing is it's basically telling us. When I said that you have to tell the story of the Exodus, when I said, we had another question, what does it mean? You say that even if we're all wise and we're all knowledgeable and we all know the whole Torah, you still have to tell the story. Why? You know it all. And now we're coming to understanding that the obligation of telling the story must, obviously, based on this, it's giving us almost like a halachic definition that it needs to include, it does not include just telling the story. Otherwise, what could they possibly be talking about? What? They're counting the 10 makot 100,000 times. To the degree that they, right? And a question was, what could he mean? He never told the story at night before, until this night. No, there's something about what was said at this night, something about that was new, that was different. Something about sitting with these 4 rabbis all night that is redefining for us what it means to tell the story. Now, I think that until this point, I think that you have to understand the Midrash this way. You have to. Otherwise, it does not make sense. As far as what it is, meaning, I think the Midrash is making it very clear here that telling the story of the, fulfilling the obligation of telling the story of the Exodus is not just telling the story, the technical story. It's not just going over the details of the story. That is clear to me, to all of us at this point, that the Midrash is saying that. I don't think the Midrash is not saying, it is saying what it does not include. It does not include just saying the story. But it isn't saying to us what it does include. Okay? It doesn't. The Midrash itself. I have an interpretation, it was hinted to before, but what I'm saying, when I say now, I think is not in the Midrash itself. And I think we can find it in what the sages say. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah makes it about something which is more technical. And I have difficulty with it. I don't fully understand it, other than it's more than just telling the story. It seems to be something that has to do with night. Telling the story in a way that's befitting the night. Maybe it's what was mentioned, maybe it's about the allegory of what night is. Even times of darkness. Maybe that's what it is. Telling the story in a way that lifts from the... But again, this is not what the Midrash is saying. This is our interpretation, which we're adding on top of the Midrash. The Midrash, all the Midrash seems to be saying at this point is, do not think that telling the story, fulfilling the obligation of telling the story of the Exodus is just about relaying the technical information. And there's 2 distinct proofs from the story and from the Midrash. But the sages one, I think, is leading us to maybe a possible answer. At least the sages' answer. Or their understanding of what it means to tell the story of the Exodus. But the sages say, the days of your life, this world, all the days of your life to bring to the days of the Mashiach. And now, we have a possible, much more positive definition of what telling the story at night is. It's telling the story of the Exodus. It's a living memory, okay, of the Exodus, which brings us to the days of the Mashiach. Meaning it is an active memory. It is a memory not of past events that are no longer, but it is, I guess, a creative memory. But when I say creative memory, I don't mean a memory that makes up new things. That is making up a story that didn't happen. But creative, a memory which is meant to create new realities. And that is one of the reasons why there is a classic interpretation, which we've shared before several times in the past years, that comes and tries to identify this event of these 5 rabbis as taking place during the Great Revolt. Again, this is not said in the Midrash. This is an interpretation on top of the Midrash. It's very important to differentiate. And that they may be, and this is one of the interpretations, classic interpretations, that they are sitting during that night during the Great Revolt. And that's why they're sitting in Bnei Brak. And we know from other historical documents that from the 5 rabbis, Bnei Brak is the city in the town of Rabbi Akiva, who was the youngest of the 5 rabbis. That's one of the other questions that we on ourselves would not know. Why are they all coming to Rabbi Akiva, who's the youngest among them, to do Pesach by him? They should be sitting. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar are Rabbi Akiva's rabbis. Why would the rabbis go to the student? So one of the classic and what?
I thought we debunked the idea that this was Passover. They weren't with their families. They weren't with their students.
Fine.
Why did we say it's
fine? If you want to understand that it's Seder, then why are they at his house for Seder? And if you want to understand that it's not Seder, still, why would the 2 rabbis go for a all-night discussion about the Exodus at the house of their student? What? Yeah. So a classic interpretation again, which does not exist in the Midrash itself, but can easily fit with what we're saying, is that they are spending the entire night planning the revolt, or strengthening, or discussing issues that have to do with the interpretation of the Exodus as it relates to the situation of what? To bring to the days of the Messiah. That's how the sages understand all the days of your life, which Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah understands as night, and the sages disagree. Maybe they're saying it's not actual technical night, as in the 12 hours or the 10 hours of where there's no light, but it's talking about historical night. To bring to the days of the Messiah. That is the obligation. The obligation of telling the story is not just what happened, it is in what way does this impact us now? What does Jewish freedom, what does, take any aspect of the Exodus that you want, or however you understand what the most fundamental aspects of the Exodus were. If it's national birth, if it's national freedom, if it's religious freedom, you can take it in many different directions depending on how you understand. But they are sitting there, if you take what the sages say together with a story, then suddenly we have the Midrash saying, now we understand why even if you're a great sage and even if you know the whole Torah, this is not just standing there and asking our kids questions and making sure they got the story right in school. It requires telling the story in a way that directly impacts how you see and how you're going to act now, on this night or any other night. Because it doesn't even need to be. By the way, there's a mitzvah to tell the story every night, any night. It just so happens that on Pesach there's a special mitzvah. But if we had time, which we won't, but on your own, if you want to see something really interesting, you look at the other page. I brought the Midrash of the 4 sons. Okay, we won't go through it now because our time is almost up. But I brought all the verses. Okay, I just want to point something out that connects to what we're saying. On the first page, I brought the 4 verses. Okay. Look at the first one. And it shall be when your sons ask you, what is this worship for? What is this worship for you? Shemot 13, and you shall explain to your son on that day. Shemot 13:14, and when in time to come, your son asks you, saying, "What does this mean?" Devarim 6, what are these testimonies, statutes, and judgments? And the question over there is, why does the Torah in 4 different places say, if your son asks? And the Midrash is something beautiful coming and saying, because there's 4 different types of questionings. And that's how it comes to, and it looks at each one and say, how are these phrasings different? It's actually a beautiful midrash. It's beautiful what the midrash does. In what way do these 4 different phrasings differ? Oh, this is a language, it sounds confrontational. Some questions will be confrontational. That's a Russia. This one is, this other question seems to be coming from a place of knowledge, that it can differentiate between the different types of obligations. That comes from a wise place. And one of them is a very simple question. What is this? Well, that's from a simpleton. And the other one, there's no question. You shall tell your son. By the way, none of these 4 in the sources are being said on Pesach or Passover. None of these questions are indicated as being said on Pesach. What's really interesting, which we're not going to go into now, is that the questions actually make beautiful sense of how the Midrash says, the Torah spoke regarding 4 sons. Okay? It's a very creative Midrash. It doesn't say anywhere it's 4 different sons. But from the phrasing and the differing of the phrasing, the Midrash says, there must be 4 different, otherwise why would the Torah write it 4 times in 4 different styles? But what's really interesting is that the answers are all mishmashed. The answer to the Chacham is not in the Torah, is not the answer that the Haggadah crisscrosses them, but we're not going to get into the now. It's very, very interesting. But if we're going back to our first Midrash, it seems to be coming and saying, and by the way, this story is told almost at the very beginning of the Maggid. It's setting it up saying, do not just go through the story, just telling what happened. We all know that is not the obligation. The obligation is to find how to translate the story and the events that happened into the realities of our lives as Jews today. What does it mean? In what way does the Exodus and the entire story and this detail of the story and that detail of the story, in what way is this translated into our life today as individuals or as a nation? In my mind, it means that people should be talking politics at the table. Really. No political disclaimer here, not this time. It seems to be coming and saying we should be discussing and arguing what is the translation of the event of the Exodus and the fact that this story has been part of our identity for 3,000 years, and what does that mean for us today? I think it means that X. I think it means we should be we should be joining the the demonstrations to not expel the Sudanese and Eritrean illegal immigrants from Israel because we were slaves in Egypt. I think it's that we should all finally get the heck out of exile and come to Israel, because the Exodus story is first and foremost the liberation of a people as a minority in a land that wasn't theirs to be a sovereign nation. It could mean a lot of things, but it seems to be saying here that the definition of what this mitzvah is to translate into the Seder night and to the story and what it means to us today and how it's going to bring us to the days of the Messiah in active memory. Anyhow, so
is that, Rabbi, is that the night that we're in, that we're not in the freedom mode, but we're somehow still...
So the question, so I would like to say yes, but I don't think it fits with the Midrash, because in the Midrash, the sages disagree with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. With Ben Zoma. First opinion is Ben Zoma, who says it's day and night. Then come the sages who come and say, no. When you say day and night, I call this world, as we know it now, you need to remember it in that level of what happened. Right now, I know what all used to happen. But I also have to remember it in a way that brings us to the days of the Mashiach.
The days of Mashiach, the day, and we're presently...
No. Yemata Mashiach, meaning the era of Mashiach. The positive future, the thing toward the goal towards which we are aiming, towards which we are hoping, which we are trying to create. To tell the story in a way that will bring us to those goals. Don't just tell the story as an event for the past that is a technical event. Rather, tell the story, discuss the story in a way that impacts on the future, which is it's almost like I'd call it a transformative memory, an active transformative memory.
So the sages aren't dealing with day and night as a resolution to all the days.
No. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah quoted that, but the Medrash and when it was put into the Haggadah, the sage's opinion was put in, even though it's not needed for what the Medrash is trying to do. But it fits very well with the story of the 5 rabbis. And with this I will end. That I hope that we all come to the Seder, and it's very easy to create this type of discussion. And I would challenge all of us to think beforehand of a few questions, to reflect for ourselves, and to toss out, even, and I mean what I say, even at the expense of saying certain parts of the Haggadah that no one understands anyway. Or just recite them quickly and get them out of the way. But come up with some questions, reflect on it ourselves, and come up with what does it mean for us that we left Egypt? What does it mean for us that we were slaves? What does it mean to be a Jew today who lives with the memory of slavery and national independence and wandering in the desert and receiving Torah and going to the land of Israel and whatever? But either as an open question or specific. What does it mean to live in 2018 in, are we oppressed? Are we not oppressed? What does it mean to live as a minority? As a Jew and as a minority? What does it mean? Are we oppressed physically? Are we oppressed spiritually? Are we oppressed by postmodernism? If so, in what is the way in which we need to gain religious sovereignty or cultural sovereignty? What are the etc. I know there'll be a million questions, but then it doesn't just become a recitation of facts that everyone already knows. And so often the questions and the answers we discuss at the Seder, they're intellectually, maybe at best, slightly intellectually interesting at best, but not impactful. I'm not saying get rid of all those regular questions and answers that we read in our Haggadah and we like to say, and fine. But this Midrash is setting the scene to come and say, it first and foremost needs to be a transformative, not just transformative as far as our intellectual experience or the togetherness of the family. All that is good and great, it is. But it needs to be something which will progress us, give us growth, a transformative, active memory. Halavai, we should merit. Okay. Pesach, Sameach v'Kasher.